hello, and welcome to episode 196 of Prose.
This week, use ancient techniques to breach the new science of the multiverse, and discover what happens when old traditions give way to new. Just as a general note about this week's stories, the first of these was recorded on the road, so I apologize for any fluctuations in general sound quality. I fear that it was rather unforeseeable and unavoidable. Please go follow the show on social media under @ProsePodcast. Even more amazing would be if you could go over to Apple Podcasts, aka what some still call iTunes, and leave a rating and or review for Prose. Ratings and reviews really do help so very much. For easiest access to the show, subscribe using Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or whatever podcast catcher is your favorite. Thank you for listening. Let's get to the tale, shall we? This week we have How Green the Grass and New Traditions. Enjoy. How Green the Grass, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Robert Frost. The whole idea of parallel realities existing concurrent to our own is something that fascinated me since I was quite young. Whether it be the meandering paths of various world mythologies, misadventuring divinities, or the more contemporary, true-to-life, exotic hypotheses of the Royal Astronomical Society and others regarding the multiverse, dual existence collisions, and cold spots, capital C and capital S. The unfortunate truth of my own current reality is one born of an infinite set of paths diverging. But this is no news. This is life. Everyone's reality is born of the death of one set of realities and the nascence of another. Being the narcissist I am, however, I went a step beyond pining for the proverbial verdant other side, that lusher other would-have-been world that is just out of grasp. The first challenge was to get over all that science I'd become so obsessed with and pivot back to the esotericism that had initially caught my younger self's imagination. Mirror worlds, time travel, astral projection. The amount of time I spent re-educating myself in the darkest corners of faux knowledge I had long since abandoned as absurdity and poorly conceived fiction. Upon second acquaintanceship, my findings did not falter. At least, they did not for a good, long while. A Mormon friend of mine changed all that. Jules. She preferred the term LDS, but shaking the other moniker is a bit tough for me after a lifetime of being conditioned to use the other by my own upbringing, pregnant with religion. By this time, I had seen thousands more other worlds die as I chose to turn left. I chickened out of asking Luna out. I took the big promotion over the highly prestigious PhD funding. Jules, a skeptic herself, even in spite of piety, was quick to guffaw a bit at my messy hair, my bird's nest beard, and my clear descent into what all of my very few friends and family members thought was madness. She railed about how all this was not empirical and that even the science on the multiverse hypothesis was a shadow of an inflated conjecture at best. Even so, Jules clued me in that her own faith's religion was bound on a form of scrying. Joseph Smith himself used a trio of seer stones, reading the mysteries of the universe in God's own will from the relative safety and darkness of his hat. Toss in some magic glasses with epic names, and that's how the faith's holy book was composed. Jules told me all this in hopes that my own reluctance toward organized religion and my utter non-acceptance of any new revelations by holy men and women after the Industrial Revolution would drive me to stop my quest for a way to look into those infinite other places I could have been, people I could have been. It did quite the opposite. I began to research the ancient and practiced art of scrying. The ancient Near, Middle, and Far East all agreed that this was one way to look into other worlds. Many had read this as a means of looking into the future, but my reading of the art was that it was a means of looking past the thin veil that physicists say separate our world from the infinite others in the multiverse. That research was rather unforgiving in just how strongly others disdained scrying. Most dismissed the practice as pseudoscience on a good day and unhealthy delusion capable of hijacking one's reality on a bad one. The flashes of these other existences were purported as hallucinatory or hypnagogic in scientific journals. In truth, in most learned circles, period. In the face of that, I forged on. I didn't choose any one method. I didn't do Smith's revelatory stones in a hat method. I didn't light any incense or candles. I didn't use any mirrors. That metaphor was a bit too on the nose and seemed far too modern to have any roots in the lost knowledge of the ancients. After a lot of trial and error through these rather ridiculous methods, the method I did come to embrace was something I had heard on a dubious History Channel documentary on Nostradamus in my adolescence. I filled my great-grandmother's porcelain basin that I had inherited from my mother with water. I used a skeleton of a defunct lamp to suspend a string with the nib of a fountain pen over the basin. The string measured just right to allow the nib to scratch the surface of the water when precisely perpendicular with the water. The method itself was rather straightforward. Bring the nib up to the highest point I could with my right hand, release and let the string swing left, the nib scratching the surface lightly and causing disturbances on the surface of the water. And stare. I was meant to get lost in those ripples, those scratches, those violent upheavals into placidity. Chaos brought to peace. I was never completely sure that I was doing that method correctly, but this became my new nightly tradition. Moreover, I was never completely sure that Nostradamus had ever taken part in such an activity to attempt his own well-known prophesying. Within 1 month, though, I began to see beyond the veil. Somewhere in those rings and ridges in the late hours, not at all fit for rational thought, but rife with possibility for true innovation, I met myself. There in the basin, I saw a balder, grayer me, tired, paunchier, but smiling. I was playing with a boy of maybe 10 years old in a sprawling yard or park. He was laughing and playing the wild, untethered way only children can before the weight of existence ties them down. A woman sat reading a newspaper on a park bench, the lines near her eyes almost yelling a warm soul full of years of easy laughter. Occasionally, the woman would peek over the top of her newspaper to smile at the boy and at me. Brown hair, coal black eyes, dark skin. She was as beautiful as she was unfamiliar to the scrying me. I was in the other world for an untold amount of time. It could have been an hour, it could have been days. Time works strangely when moving between realities, I have found. I do know that I might have gotten lost in that in-between existence, looking in on the me of so God knows how many choices ago, save for locking eyes with the there me. The shock on my face was like lightning to my brain. I felt scorching pain behind my eyes. My heart throbbed asynchronously and my insides felt as if they were melting. It was such that I'd never felt before and had no baseline to which I could compare. I came out of that session with my own screeching voice in my ears. I was once you! I know that I had screamed at some point because my throat was ragged to the point of bleeding. But a part of me knew that me had shouted at me, not the other way around. I wondered what my wife and son made of that breakdown in the apartment. Or was it our backyard? I wondered if my choice to practice and hone my scrying, my defiance of science and embracing of the occult had created another divergence that had ripples far beyond my great-grandmother's basement. Recovery from that rubbing up of universes took me almost a full month. The fear put in me by both the debilitating pain and meeting another me made me hesitate another 2 weeks after that. With all that time behind me, however, all I could do was scry. I became so well practiced that I could leap between realities in minutes rather than hours. There I was, a washed-up musician trying to chase fame that had left me in my 20s. There I was, an alcoholic with 3 divorces under my belt, working at an auto plant in my hometown. There I was, a tenured professor at UCLA, the foremost expert on waves being harnessed as a means of renewable energy. There I was, a PhD candidate in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, then Lubbock, then Los Angeles, then Fayetteville, then London, then Copenhagen. There I was, a B-list actor working to be an A-lister and failing. There I was, a preacher back in Pittsville, Louisiana, in the church my grandparents called home for so many years. There I had children, there I did not. There I had a loving wife, there I did not. I lost myself in those infinite possibilities. It wasn't until Jules came over that I realized just how lost I'd become in all those realities. I had disappeared into the would-have bins for 6 full weeks after the last 6 that had so scarred and scared me. My life was coming apart. Bills had been left unpaid. I'd been terminated from my job with the fancy promotion. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror from all the weight I had lost, from all the meals I'd forgotten to eat. My family was terrified that something had happened to me, but they were too far away to check in. Hence, Jules. She told me that her presence there should register as an intervention. She told me that I had to start living in the here and now. She broke down my scrying setup and she refused to leave me alone. She was right not to do so. I would have fallen right back into my newfound obsession. She and everyone else who cared for me thought I'd gone fully mad and asked me to consider a temporary voluntary commitment to an institution that specialized in therapy for the exhausted. I was receptive to everything Jules was doing for me, save that. Instead, she simply left an article by a theorist named Max Tegmark that was rather obsessed with the multiverse. It was a sly trick that one. I read it like it was gospel. I lapped it up like only an addict desperate for a fix can. The message therein was certainly the opposite of my now beloved esotericism, but it fed me the joy of the multiverse that I had been so abruptly cut off from.
An entire ensemble is often much simpler than one of its members. The principle can be stated more formally using the notion of algorithmic information content. The algorithmic information content is a number is, roughly speaking, the length of the shortest computer program that will produce that number as output. For example, consider a set of all integers, which is simpler, the whole set or just one number. Naively, you might think that a single number is simpler, but the entire set can be generated by quite a trivial computer program, whereas a single number can be hugely long. Therefore, the whole set is actually simpler. Similarly, the higher level multiverses are simpler. Going from our universe to the level 1 multiverse eliminates the need to specify initial conditions. Upbringing to level 2 eliminates the need to specify physical constants, and a level 4 multiverse eliminates the need to specify anything at all. A common feature of all 4 multiverse levels is that the simplest and arguably most elegant theory involves parallel universes by default. To deny the existence of those universes, one need to complicate the theory by adding experimentally unsupported processes and ad hoc postulates: finite space, wave function collapse, and ontological asymmetry. Our judgment, therefore, comes down to which we find more wasteful and inelegant: many worlds or many words. Perhaps we will gradually get used to the weird ways of our cosmos and find its strangeness to be part of its charm.
Charm. Huh. I had been enthralled by all these other worlds, all their inelegance, all the mess and mind-bending infinity of infinity. I laid back and thought on all that I saw, all that I could have been and all that I was not and all that I never would be. And I wept at all those divergent paths I would never know, because for my own sanity, I needed to shirk off that beautiful asymmetry and live in the here and now. Two roads diverge in the ocean. And sorry I could not travel both. Two roads diverge in the ocean. And sorry I could not travel both. Long I stood and looked down as far as I could to where it bent, Robert Frost. Thank you for listening to How Green the Grass. All sounds you hear come from freesound.org and freemusicarchive.org, and they are both being used under CC 0 1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. Next up this week, we have another fun little short story. Well, maybe it's not so much fun as it is depressing, but still. Come walk along the lines of memory in New Traditions next. New Traditions, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. I always wondered what would be born of an ever-shrinking family after time and circumstance chipped away at the special rights that those I loved and that those that loved me in return participated in every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, every day that seemed worth marking, be it pre-printed on a dollar store calendar or not. Some might call it progress, to move forward beyond the repetitive. Certainly, my brother and I are progress fiends, jonesing for opportunities of self-growth, be they intellectual, physical, spiritual, sexual, you name it. Most of my friends and acquaintances with whom I surround myself do the same too. We are addicts for the new, junkies in need of a progress fix on any given day. Once you take that first bump, it's difficult to stop. The concept of traditions is what made me take pause yesterday amid the Easter celebrations that seemed to call back to me from years past. Normally, on Easter, I would wake up early to find the Easter Bunny had delivered me a basket full of goodies, only to be reminded that I couldn't touch that haul until after church. Before we communed with God, we would eat a rather large breakfast of eggs, pancakes, and bacon, a treat that was not too terribly common in our home. My family and I would then attend a church service. We would take some pictures in our nicest clothes with some fresh flowers as accoutrement. We would eat a large meal, one of the very few that would involve expensive items such as ham and real butter, luxuries our family had only twice a year, if we were lucky. Then, once we were done with the family feasting, we would head outside to do multiple egg hunts, winning loose change, candies, and more dollar store goodies in the plastic prize eggs. The hunting exhausted, we would head inside, divvy up the found eggs, the prizes from the prize eggs, and finally get to open up our individual Easter baskets in earnest. Again, we didn't have much, but my family made Easter downright epic. These were our traditions well into my adulthood. Yes, we hunted eggs even beyond my 30th birthday. What can I say? We all suffered some pretty mighty Peter Pan complexes. Yesterday, though? Yesterday was different. I sat in my apartment wondering what I'd eat for breakfast. I settled on a bit of powdered protein in some cold water, a shake through one of those sport drink mixers you get from the nutrition store, one of those devices people who want you to know that they work out carry around with them all the time. No special family breakfast here. My father had long ago gone on to another family. Powdered breakfast downed, I flipped to the stations on my limited, quasi-free cable provided by my apartment complex. I couldn't find anything worth the watching, so I flipped my television over to YouTube and, feeling nostalgic, put on a couple of my favorite specials from my childhood. Buttons and Rusty from A Chucklewood Easter brought tears to my eyes and a smile to my face. They made me not feel so alone. After that 20 minutes of nostalgia, I followed the next link to the Family Circus Easter. I laughed quite a bit at just how much my brother hated the eldest sister's singing voice on that special. He and I hadn't spoken in, 8 years now? I had trouble keeping up with the time anymore. I had trouble remembering why we'd ever stopped speaking in the first place. I took a nap. After that exhilarating morning of celebration, it was time for lunch. I went back to my fridge and found just as little as before. I decided to order a large 5-cheese pizza from Jess's Pasta and More around the corner. So much for a special lunch. This was indulgent, but not nearly as appreciated or laced with love as those innumerable other Easter lunches. 45 minutes later, my pizza had arrived, had been paid for, had been consumed down to the last 2 pieces, and put away into the fridge for later late-night snacking. In the lazy haze that accompanies too many carbs and too full a belly, I decided to go out. There was a Dollar General 3 blocks down, and I had a mind to do something for Easter. An uneventful walk took me to the store, and I was pleased to see that, since it was Easter Sunday, the baskets and plastic grass and chalky chocolate Easter bunnies were all 75% off. I proceeded to buy $40 worth of the leftovers that still haunted the now sparse end caps of the store. The clerks on duty gave me pitying smiles. They knew what a lone 40-year-old man scrounging, bleary-eyed for holiday leftovers meant, it would seem. I walked my Easter haul back home and arranged it in my $1.22 basket. A gaudy pink and blue and gold thing. Cheap. Beautiful. My own attempt at playing the role of Easter Bunny looked pitiful. God, I miss my mother. 7 years gone, and my world still felt anemic. Too thin. Wrong. I capped my holiday celebration off with eating all that dollar store candy for dinner and taking down a bottle of Jack. What a fabulous new tradition, right? Was this inevitable, though? Did all new traditions come in the wake of the deaths of older, more hallowed practices? My New Year's Eve orange Kool-Aid. My Christmas stockings first, big presents second, brunch third ordering. My black-eyed peas and chow chow on New Year's Day. My July 4th watermelon crawl and bottle rocket scramble. These were sacred memories to me, yet they were already fading in my own mind. New traditions would surely spring up to fill the void. The only option was for the void to remain and hollow me out, and that couldn't be the way of things. Amid all that reminiscence and philosophizing, the Jack took me to bed. I dreamt of those warm spring days in Arkansas, when the relationship lines had not been blurred, when things were simpler, when I was surrounded and supported by those I loved, and those that loved me in return. Thank you for listening to New Traditions, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. Both the tracks you hear come from freemusicarchive.org and are being used under CC 0, 1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. In case you didn't hear the little crackles here and there in this episode, I am fighting with my equipment. I've bought some new pieces and am in need of some further new equipment, and I'm trying to make Prose the best listening experience for you possible. So I apologize for any listening blips and blops there, but hopefully as I continue to expand my own technical library of items that make the show more sound, your enjoyment will increase along with it. At any rate, as always, I'm going to beg you to remember to love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, always stranger than fiction. Thank you for listening. See you next time.